company summit. It's truly remarkable that we're able to gather. We would like to thank the All China Federation of Industry and Commerce, the governments of Hainan and Haikou for their support. There's been a lot of stories worth telling, but in the interest of time, I won't share the details, but I'm sure those stories will be recorded in the book and chronicles of the club. So we are looking at the culmination of the event, and we are honored to have with us some of the provincial leaders. We have Mr. Liu Xigui, who's the party secretary and the top leader of the Hainan Province. We also have Mr. Li Zhaoqian, full-time vice chairman of All China Federation of Industry and Commerce. We have with us Mr. He Zhongyou, the member of the party committee of Hainan Province, and Sun Dahai. We also have with us other government leaders from the provincial government and the city government of Haikou. I would like to ask you to put our hands together to welcome them. Since our inception, the summit has received great interest and also participation from the diplomatic community. We have from Australia, Brazil, Canada, Colombia, Croatia, Finland, France, Germany, Ireland, Japan, Jordan, New Zealand, Norway, Poland, Spain, Switzerland, and Thailand. We have the ambassadors and the chargé d'affaires. We have also the diplomats from Malaysia, from the US, and Indonesia, the UK. Welcome to you all. So we would like to kickstart the agenda for today, the exciting part of this event. I would like to pass over to the party secretary of Hainan Province. Honorable guests, ladies and gentlemen, friends, good afternoon. Let me start on behalf of the People's Government of Hainan and the party leadership group and the people of Hainan to say welcome to you all and also congratulations on the holding of this summit. I want to take the opportunity also to thank those of you who have supported and also participated in the social and economic development of Hainan. Those include business leaders and members from all walks of life. I would like to say a heartfelt thank you to you all. "2020 is truly an extraordinary year to Hainan. We know the COVID-19 pandemic has been a disaster to mankind. But under the capable leadership of President Xi, and thanks to the personal design, deployment, and drive of President Xi, we've been able to implement a number of policy measures adopted at the top of the government. Within a month, we were able to contain the spread of local cases. That gave us the ability to recover, reopen the economy, reopen schools and our markets. And that also led our economy to move in a positive direction since the start of this year. That's why we're able to achieve the goal of a moderately prosperous society on all fronts. So it's truly an extraordinary, also in the sense that we have become a free trade port. So this is year one of this FTP policy. The FTP policy is personally designed, deployed, and driven by President Xi Jinping. It's a major national strategy. And this major strategy is now being implemented in Hainan. This symbolizes that China's door to the outside world is not closing up, but rather opening wider. That decision was actually contemplated in 2018, made in 2018, and 2018 marked the 40th anniversary of China's reform and opening up, and it was also the 30th anniversary of Hainan's special economic zone status. President Xi announced personally in Hainan that we'll be making the effort to build the FTP and make the experimentation with Chinese characteristics. And in June, the central government adopted the master plan for building the FTP in Hainan. The creation of the FTP opens up unprecedented opportunities for Hainan to thrive and prosper. In the last 2 years, we've been focusing our efforts on laying the foundation for the FTP. The announcement of the FTP master plan launched Hainan into the next chapter of development. And the master plan made it clear that this would be a FTP with Chinese characteristics under the leadership of the CPC. We are committed to socialist market economy with Chinese characteristics. So it will be the only FTP with socialist market economy design. We have been learning from the best practices of FTPs around the world, what they have where they have excelled. In particular, in terms of creating a framework of rule of law, and also in implementing trade and investment facilitation and liberalization measures. We, for example, on zero and low tariff and tax incentives, we have done that. On service liberalization, investment liberalization, and facilitation, the facilitation of movement of people, shipments of goods, also easy in and out, easy flows of capital, safe, secure, and orderly flow of data. So those are the 5 free flows that we often talk about. The policies are now being implemented as we speak, and I can give you an example. The 15% corporate income tax, the 15% personal income tax, so those will be the caps. And the policies are now being introduced. Since day one, when we launched the master plan, we had one goal. By 2025, we will have to launch our business on the front line, make it fully liberalized, and then we will guard the second line. With that as our guiding principle, we will work on the successful implementation of those policies I mentioned. We have to become economically prosperous, socially progressive, and also livable province with benefits shared by all the people. We have to make Hainan a place to stay for the local people, for holiday makers from around the world, and for business leaders from around the world. The FTP in Hainan is not only for the 4 million people, but rather for the 1.4 billion Chinese people. So the people of Hainan will have to feel belonged, and then it will have to create benefits for people in China. And the most important is to make sure that in the existing, on top of the existing conditions and policies, which are number one in China, we will continue to make progress and make sure we have the best environment of all free trade ports. We believe Mother Nature is the greatest asset and treasure, and we cannot loan it to others and get it back after. We have to look after our planet with great care. We have the full confidence in achieving the goal, the vision that I set out. And to do that, first and foremost, we have decided that the environment on Hainan can only go better, it cannot deteriorate. And for that, we have taken a number of measures, for example, curbing the overgrowth of real estate development since 2015.
Since 2015 or 2016, we have implemented the policy of restricting the purchases of homes and housings. From 2020, actually, the whole province has implemented such a restrictive policy. That's to say, we don't allow the province to be dominated by any single industry or sector. We are no longer just a processor of real estate projects. So you see that in Hainan Province, in Haikou, the average home price is 17,000 RMB per square meter. And that way, more businesses and more people could come to settle down in our province. We are not so expensive. For environmental and ecological problems, we have the zero tolerance policy. With food resolution, we have in the area, for example, of real estate, and in some other areas subject to environmental degradation, have shown such a zero tolerance. But of course, we do encourage the development of a high quality and a healthy real estate developments. For example, the commercial real estate and homes for talented people, affordable housings, and tourism-based housings. Then for the ecological and environmental problems, some of which are left over from history, definitely they will be subject to our rectification. We have taken a series of measures. For example, we want to make Hainan a province enjoying clean energy. By 2030, our aim is the whole province uses only clean energy. Even for our farmers, by 2030, they will no longer burn firewood. They will rather use natural gas to replace the firewood. Now, in the province, for the disposable, not degradable plastics, we are beginning to ban them. By the year 2030 in Hainan, we will no longer sell ICE vehicles, internal combustion engine-based vehicles. So you see, we really have taken very relevant and practical measures and policies, and therefore the eco-environment in my province is turning for the better year after year. For example, PM 2.5 concentration in the past 5 years, every year will go down by 1 point, by 1 base point. Also, 44 million square meters of land in central mountainous region have been designated as the tropical forest parks. We insist on green development for high quality, high standard. They are the keywords for each and every of our economic projects. For all those projects which are harmful to the environment, we say no to them, even though they might create GDP for us, or they might generate tax revenues for us. Moreover, we also have been working our best to optimize the economic structure. For example, for the service industry, every year we want its share in the provincial GDP to go up by 1 percentage point. Last year, it was 53%. This year, I think the services industry will be more than 60% of the provincial GDP. Hainan is also keen to further improve the business environment, such as featuring rule of law, facilitation, and convenience. In addition, we also have invited 102 best kindergartens, primary schools, and middle schools to have campuses in my province. Also, 45 domestic top hospitals are invited to open a branch or a campus here. We are also making Hainan a province in the smart ocean by developing digital technologies and the digital economy. Therefore, in optical electricity, road, and other infrastructure developments, and also in natural gas, in water infrastructure developments. These are the so-called 5 most important components of infrastructure. Hainan has made a lot of investments and progress. In the next 5-year plan period, Hainan will invest almost 70 billion yuan to further digitalize the province. So, digital governance and management will make Hainan a digital province, a well-governed province, a clean province. So I have explained to you what efforts we have made in the province. We have cultivated the eco-friendly software park and rejuvenation park, the 2 ICT industrial parks. This year, I think, will have the output value of 100 billion yuan. Then for new technologies such as blockchain, they also will play an important part in Hainan's economic development. A couple of days ago, I visited a company. The company's name is Jinpan smart technology company. The company exports heavily. It exports transformers to some European countries and to the United States. In terms of digital design, in terms of the smart manufacturing, in terms of smart marketing, in terms of the smart and digital operations, they are doing very well. And they have therefore greatly improved their productivity and efficiency. So digital economy is always already part of our life. Digital economy represents the future of greater prosperity for the province. Digital economy, digital era. These keywords also are for everybody. That's to say, each of us must embrace digitalization. Digitalization has the potential to generate unlimited efficiency and gains. This year, I'm very happy to see the convening of the China Green Companies Summit in Hainan. You also have chosen the very good topic. That's business growth in the digital era. It fits so well with the vision of our province. Therefore, today I'm so pleased to come to the summit meeting and to make a presentation. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, I wish the summit a full success. In 2 days' time, it's the traditional Chinese Mooncake Festival. It also will soon be the 71st birthday of the People's Republic of China. So 2 festivals in 1 holiday. I wish all of you health, happiness, and success. Thank you. Many thanks to Party Secretary Liu Xigui for the wonderful speech. He has portrayed the great and brilliant vision of the province. And also many thanks to him for his best wishes. Now I give the floor to Li Zhaoqian, full-time Chairman of the All China Federation of Industry and Commerce, and also the Vice President of All China Chamber of Industry and Commerce. You have the floor, Chairman Li. Many thanks. You haven't got my name or title wrong. Thank you. And Honorable Party Secretary Liu, Honorable Chairman Jack Ma, and also the Chairperson Wang Yusuo. Dear members of the CEC, ladies and gentlemen, it's my great pleasure to come to the 2020 China Green Companies Summit. I think this year's summit has chosen a very relevant topic, that's business growth in the digital era, in the post-pandemic era. But I'm not going to talk about how you should embrace digital technologies in the new era. I think it's up to the entrepreneurs and the experts. The organizer actually has asked me to speak from the perspective of the All China Industry and the Commerce Federation. I have 3 points to make. First, the private sector is very important. Definitely, we wish its long-term development and prosperity. I'm from the All China Federation of Industry and Commerce. In fact, one of our very important missions is to support and help the development of the private sector. President Xi Jinping most recently also has reaffirmed that the non-public ownership economy is an important part of the socialist market economy, and it's highly necessary and important to promote the development of businesses of a non-public ownership nature. Since the 18th National Congress of the CPC, the President on many occasions has organized meetings, has surveyed, and has made important remarks about the importance of the private sector development. In the year 2018, there were some suspicions about the government's policies. Even some private entrepreneurs were not very encouraged. Then President Xi Jinping organized 3 meetings to give them confidence. In particular, on November the 1st, 2018, President Xi organized a roundtable with the private sector representatives, reaffirming the importance of the private sector, analyzing their difficulties, and greatly offering support to them. On July the 21st this year, the President again attended a roundtable meeting with the entrepreneurs, offering to help and support them, encouraging them to do a good job, to do our homework. Not long ago, the President has made remarks about the 2 unshakables, and also has said that trust is the key word for our policies towards the private sector. That is very encouraging. In the past 70 years, actually, there have been twists and turns of the private sector in China. At the beginning, they almost were extinguished. Later, they were allowed to do business again. Under the socialist market economy, they grew very fast under the 2 unshakable policies. After the 18th National Congress of the CPC, they have enjoyed high-quality developments. China is a fertile ground for entrepreneurship, and also the private sector's development and prosperity is a characteristic of the socialism with the Chinese characteristics. The 2 unshakables already have become part of the country's constitution and the Communist Party's articles of association. They are not likely to change. There might still be some noises, but the President offers encouragement to us. Second, the private businessmen have a sense of responsibility to the country and to the society, and are deeply trusted by the Communist Party. In 2018, President Xi Jinping already said that private businessmen are our people. So what is our people? In fact, that is a very down-to-earth expression of the trust in the private sector and in our private entrepreneurs. He has sent a strong signal to the society that the private sector is very important, and the government fully supports their further development and prosperity.
The recognition of President Xi is due to the responsibility and patriotism shown on the part of private entrepreneurs, especially in the fight against COVID-19 and other disasters. In the face of COVID-19, the entrepreneurs, despite the losses on their business side, also responded with swift actions. They implemented corporate social responsibility. They put life first, and they showed a great sense of responsibility. 17.2 billion was donated, and then 11.9 billion RMB worth of donation in kind was made. 6.1 billion RMB worth of charitable funds were set up, and 15.1 billion RMB worth of subsidies and rent write-offs have been provided to support COVID-19 response. When COVID-19 was spreading around the world, our business leaders also joined the international effort to fight COVID-19. Post-COVID-19, we see also entrepreneurs are actively involved in the policy of dual circulation. This is a policy articulated by President Xi earlier this year. During the 2 sessions, we have to create the domestic circulation as the core, and then it will have to be mutually reinforced and supported by the international circulation. So this is showing that we are now moving towards high quality growth, and we need to make strategic choices and business investments based on the new reality. And we have to advance our reform on the supply side. We have to be involved in the international markets, improving our ability to expand our business footprint, make sure we can have more impactful, more competitive business activities. Hainan is a hotbed for investment, and I have been liaising with Hainan for 5 years at my group at the club, and we have covered pretty much every inch of the ground. We have developed a deeper understanding of Hainan. We believe Hainan is a testbed for the dual circulation policy, and there are excellent opportunities lying ahead. We're now at a new starting point. The Green Companies Summit convenes a large number of forward-looking, visionary business leaders. We believe you'll be able to find the opportunities with your own eyes. You'll be able to understand Hainan and be involved in the new chapter of growth. And with that, I would like to wish the summit a complete success and wish you business prosperity. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Li Zhaoqian, for conveying and also unpacking the central government policy and some of the business opportunities associated with those policies for us. And I think that is really reassuring to the business leaders in the audience. And I would like to ask Chairman Jack Ma to train your speaking skills. I will still have the moderatorship for today, but I think it will be a competitive bid going forward. With that, we are moving into the plenary, and we are focusing on business growth in the digital age. We know digitalization has become the trend of the time. It's inevitable, and there's been a lot of shifts, paradigm shifts. A lot of transformations are happening. Businesses and business leaders are looking at digitalization as the next big thing. That's why we have a number of business leaders gathered around to talk about this issue. First to take the floor is Mr. Ma Weihua, who was the president of China Merchants Bank, and he's also the most innovative banker. After he retired, he became a philanthropist. He connected some of the ideas in business to promote philanthropy in China. So with that, we would like to welcome Mr. Ma to the floor. Honorable Party Secretary Liu Xigui, Mr. Zhao Qian, Jack Ma, leaders, ambassadors, business leaders in the audience, it's my great pleasure to come back to Hainan, my second home. In the 90s, I worked in Hainan as the head of the Hainan branch of the PBOC. So I worked here for 7 years. Today, looking back, I'm truly gratified and excited to see that the vision we had for Hainan, a free trade port, is becoming a reality. And we see that the island still has lush trees, clear waters, and the blue ocean and blue sky. That's really gratifying too. This annual summit is the first time that the entrepreneurs are able to meet after the COVID-19 pandemic. We have Jack, we have Guo Guangchang, and others working around the clock, responding to the pandemic, and I think it's truly epic. The heroism and the patriotism that they have shown. At the same time, we have been doing some self-reflection. this pandemic has shown the vulnerabilities of the society, and mankind needs to rethink. We need to avoid the next crisis through our own actions and change. In human history, plague or pandemic is not uncommon. It actually has followed the progress of mankind. But since industrialization, we've seen that there's been more intense and more frequent cases of pandemic and epidemics. In the 80s, we had about 20 major epidemic events, and 8 happened actually in the last decade. Also, we see from data that the last decade was the hottest in a century, and the temperature in 2016 was the highest, and it was actually overtaken by the temperature reading in 2019. On the 6th of February, the temperature in the South Pole was 18.3 Celsius, the highest in record. This shows that climate change probably has some association with the frequent occurrence of pandemics. We see that the climate change issue is not only giving rise to epidemics, the bushfire in Australia, which burned for 221 days, the locust plague that's still happening in many parts of Asia and Africa, the swine flu, the flooding. We expect the sea level to rise by 0.6 or even 1 meter or even 2 meters if we cannot curb our emissions. And this is also exacerbating issues such as poverty, water scarcity, food shortage. There is still 1.9 billion people living under $3.2 per day. 690 million people are still suffering from famine and hunger, and the COVID crisis has added 130 million people to people who are suffering from hunger. Why we have climate warming? The Industrial Revolution, which brought about progress and productivity to human civilization, has also redefined the relationship between man and nature, because we were using fossil fuels excessively. We were committed to indiscriminate deforestation, plundering of natural resources without considering the environmental consequences. We were after GDP growth. That's why we had unprecedented 400 pp in CO2 concentration in 2016. This was another cause of global warming, so it's time for us to really have some self-reflection. President Xi recently said mankind needs a revolution of itself to accelerate the shift to greener ways of development and ways of life. And we should not turn a blind eye or ear to nature's warnings over and over again. We should not continue on this path of doom without any awakening, without any restoration and protection. I think this has already been mentioned by many. We've heard from many whistleblowers. They have cautioned us to keep looking out for balance between economic growth and environmental and social progress. We have the triple bottom lines, the ethical responsible investment to the ESG investment idea. This is encouraging to see, but we are aware that even ESG investments today are about choosing the good from the bad. Companies that are still implementing the old models of pollute and treat. And poverty is still rising, and inequality is still rising. So we're looking for new ways of sustainable growth. And sustainable finance, I think, is an excellent idea. It has the vision of creating integrated economic, social, and environmental impact and value. We believe this is the way to go. Among them, impact investing is a very important because it emphasizes that before every decision is made, we look at the alignment of social, economic, and environmental goals. So it should turn out positive financial returns, and it should also present quantifiable, measurable social impact. So this approach does not mean we wait for pollution to occur and then we remediate later. We have to look at the nexus among those three pillars at the very outset, and this will help us avoid the problems that we had before. On the 25th of September 2015, the UN adopted the SDGs, 17 goals altogether. China was really outperforming on many of those goals. For example, poverty alleviation, we are able to contribute over 75% of the global fight against poverty, and also carbon neutrality. We are now making huge strides towards achieving that goal by 2060. But there's still a gap of about $2.5 trillion in terms of funding for developing countries to achieve the SDGs, and we cannot simply rely on government spending or charitable donations. We have to use investment in impact investing to influence our investment behaviors, and we need to adopt sustainable finance to prevent those problems from happening. It's time for us to rethink and change our behavior. We have to say goodbye to our old ways of doing business and fishing without protecting the fish pond.
The CEC actually is an early bird. 13 years ago, that's at the first session of the Green Companies Summit, the CEC already proposed the idea of ethical business conduct and the business for socio-economic sustainable development. Last year at the Yabuli Forum, Chinese entrepreneurs also suggested the initiative, asking for more entrepreneurs to be practitioners of a sustainable development. In the past 6 years, the Social Value Investment Alliance has released the Social Value 99 Index, choosing 99 companies with the best performance in sustainable development out of the 300 constituent stocks in Shanghai and the Shenzhen stock markets, and that index has outperformed almost all the other index in terms of the returns. Ladies and gentlemen, the world is in an unprecedented transitional period. A new round of technological revolution and industrial revolution is emerging. It offers us very important opportunities for sustainable development. The Chinese businesses already are very active and competitive on the world arena. I believe after the COVID-19 pandemic, they will also become the important driving force of a green recovery. This year is just the beginning. Thank you. Thank you. Now, the next keynote speaker is also a very smart person. Actually, he studied philosophy at the university. So if you want to talk about philosophy, he is always more brilliant. He is Mr. Guo Guangchang, chairman of Fosam International Limited. You have the floor. Thank you. I'm smart, but you see, I have got a bald head. It doesn't mean that I'm really smart. So Party Secretary Liu and Provincial Governor Xiaoming, Jack Ma, and the chairperson, and distinguished guests from home and abroad. This year is not easy For most Chinese entrepreneurs, we even don't have 1 day off work. We don't have holidays. We don't have the hobbies or interests. So our only interest is in work. But some people are different. Some people, learn martial arts. Some people even sing with Wang Fei, the pop star in China. Some people also try to learn Chinese painting. And this guy, however, is the boss behind two, each 1 trillion value companies. And the person is an alien, I think, an alien from the Mars. He has come to the Earth planet only to spend his holiday. So, ladies and gentlemen, well, for the entrepreneurs like us, we have landed on planet Earth only to work, maybe also to spend holidays, especially in the beautiful islands of Hainan. We can even continue to work while enjoying our holiday. Why not? Because we live in the digital era and everything is possible. In fact, the dream is becoming true. My company, For Sam, has the keywords of a holiday. We believe people should be enjoying holiday every day, but there are some preconditions to be met. First, your business must be highly digitalized. For me, in fact, I'm the outsider, a layman, but I know one thing for sure, that I always use Ding Ding, Jack Mark's platform, and all my data is in my mobile phone. Previously, for so-called horizontal or vertical management, only less than 10 people could directly report to you. But now it's quite different. So you can transform your organizational structure. You can transform your task forces by digitalization. So digitalization makes holiday and work combined fully possible. Second, Hainan Province actually is the best place for you to combine work and pleasure. Well, some people will say that, oh, I don't go to Hainan because I'm too busy. But as long as you are in Hainan, you feel already on holiday. Why? When you look at the blue sky, the blue ocean, I think you no longer have pains in your heart or in your mind. You want to get relaxed. But actually, Hainan has a lot of business opportunities, in particular tourism, consumption. There is a lot of unmet need here. For example, in terms of health care. In fact, I visited Yangpu development zone in Hainan, one of the earliest development zones in the country. But now Hainan has become the free trade area, so the Yangpu development zone is very, very promising. Also, well, you can work here, you can enjoy your holiday here, but Hainan definitely can always do a better job. For example, as our party secretary Liu has said, Hainan has upgraded education. If kids could enjoy high quality education here and elderly people could enjoy happy retirement years here, then you can also have more lenient policies to attract talented young people, as some other provinces are doing. For example, if a person has got a bachelor's degree, you should allow the person to settle down here. So in that way, people are settling down here, working here, enjoying themselves here. Why not? For my company, For Sam, we have built Atlantis Resort and Club Med. They are very successful. We have 4 other important projects. One is For Sam the shopping mall in Bondi area in Haikou. Also, For Sam Healthcare has made investments here. For Sam Fashion Company is working with a Zhongbao company here. For Sam Tourism, it has entered into also memorandum of cooperation with a local company here. So for my company, we will continue to invest here so that we can fully help Hainan become the holiday zone. For me, I think Hainan is my second home. I have so much passion for the province, for the island. So here I seriously advocate all of you to come back to Hainan very often, because when you are here, you're always in good mood. When you are in good mood, you work more efficiently. When your people work efficiently, your business is prosperous. If rich people if your wife and your children can settle down here, everything is happy. So happiness is everything. For example, you can always follow the role model of Jack Ma. See how happy he is. Thank you. So, a very philosophical speaker and a humorous speaker. The next entrepreneur to present used to work at the Development Research Center of the State Council. He knows the macroeconomy very well. He is also a financial practitioner. Who is the next speaker? Mr. Chen Dongsheng, Chairman and the CEO of Haikou Insurance Group. Honorable Party Secretary Liu and Chairman Li and Chairman Jack Ma, the honorable ambassadors, dear participants, good afternoon. In recent days, I have together traveled with Jack Ma to different parts of the country. Yesterday, we were in Wuhan. Now we are in Haikou. So for the Party Secretary Liu and other leaders, I want to report to you something very important. First, the world is changing, and for the great power competition, or in the post-U.S.-China relationship era, definitely there will be even greater uncertainties. There are also globally greater uncertainties. So for the governments and for the businesses, we have to learn to survive and prosper with the great power competition and with the huge uncertainties. Second, the U.S.-China relationship is complicated. China has proposed the economic strategy of a dual circulation. In fact, dual circulation is about the upgrading of the Chinese economy. China will further tap into the domestic market potentials. That's consumerism. China will help upgrade the manufacturing so it becomes smart manufacturing, high-end manufacturing, or even digital manufacturing as championed by Jack Ma. So before I had the meeting with the party secretary, I also talked to the provincial governor of Hainan. The provincial governor explained very clearly to us the policies of a Hainan free trade zone. So in the dual circulation structure, Hainan will soon become a fully fledged free trade zone and a free trade port. What is the role for Hainan? I think it represents so-called import substitution. Now the Chinese don't need to travel abroad to buy luxury goods. You just buy luxury goods at home, or the luxury goods could be made in China, and luxury brands should be attracted to make investments in here. So it's a kind of import substitution. Moreover, for the Hainan reform, actually, it's a laboratory. It also means China definitely is determined to stimulate domestic demand, and the domestic demand should be the most important driving force of China's economic development upgrading, and definitely domestic demand will be the biggest locomotive for further economic expansion. So after listening to the governor, to the party secretary's remarks, I think I have got a better understanding also of the policymakers' intention, and also I therefore know that Hainan really is the laboratory for the country's new economic strategy of a dual circulation. Then after the outbreak of the COVID-19, yes, the society has changed, the world has changed, and individuals also are further urged to embrace technologies, in particular digital technologies. Jack Ma has proposed the concept of a new type of a globalization. Previously, globalization was mainly steered and led by the multinationals for their production value traits. But now, new globalization will have data in the central place. I fully agree with Jack Ma. Technology changes everything. In China, the government, actually for G20 meetings now, they always are online. They always have video conferences now. So the digital era will only make a faster progress, and the whole world is urged to further embrace digital technology. China actually is a pioneer in this digital transformation. So in the future competition, which country will become the first fully digitalized economy who will definitely leave an indelible footprint upon the human history. So the pandemic has also reminded us of the importance of health. Health is more valuable than gold. So the next era is also the era of health. I mean, people want to live healthier and live longer. Recently, I wrote an essay saying that the era of longevity is around the corner. What does it mean? About 50 years ago, what was the average longevity? In 50 years' time, I think it will be 100 years old of average life expectancy. And people might still have illnesses or diseases, but it doesn't prevent you from having a long and happy life. What is the characteristic of the longevity era? First, low fatality. For example, even cancer now has become a chronic disease. In the era of longevity, people's life can even be further extended. The traditional pyramid demographic structure will become something like a bar chart, will become a bar-shaped. So in every 4 people, there will be 1 person above 65 years old. You can just look at Japan as a role model. Now, in Japan, for every 100 people, 28.7 of them are above the age of 65. It's already more than 25%. It's almost every 1 in 3. That is symbolic. That's symbolic of the era of longevity. So the longevity economy is also on the horizon. Yes, we have the era of digitalization. However, we also have the era of longevity. This definitely will fundamentally change our society and our economy. So science and technology, data, health, and longevity, these are the key words for the future economic and social momentum.
And I would like to come up with a projection. We will see a negative population growth after the total hits 10 billion. It took us 200 years to come this far, and I think economic prosperity, social progress will drive population growth, and in 50 years, probably population growth will stagger, and this will be the era of new population equilibrium. So that will be my presentation. Thank you very much. Thank you to Mr. Liu, Mr. Chen. The ambassadors will have to attend the National Day reception, so they will have to fly back this evening. And Party Secretary Liu is also leaving for another important engagement. Let's give a warm send-off to Party Secretary Liu and those that have to leave. Next, we will have a panel discussion on the issue of value restructuring of global supply chain. Because of COVID-19 and also the trade tension between China and the US, there has been a call for repivoting the supply chain back at home or close to home. Because I'm lacking in moderating skills, so I'm passing this moderatorship to Professor Qian from Tsinghua University. And for panelists, we have Paul Fang from Medea, Thompson Lee from TCL, Lei Jun from Xiaomi, Chen Yang from Nine Dragons Paper, and Tetsuro Oma from Panasonic. Panasonic Representative Director, Member of the Board for China, Northeast Asia. We're addressing the topic of the restructuring of the global value chain. This is a pertinent topic to Chinese companies that are more exposed to international trade. This is the reality that we're dealing with and also a chronic challenge. It has to do with business and economic theory. For example, we know the division of labor has moved from inter-industry to intra-industry and from intra-industry to intra-product. There are also non-commercial logics driving this. For example, the redesign of the supply chain closer to home and also the breaking up of the supply chain in some parts of the world. So those factors intertwined created an unprecedented shock on the supply chain. In this reality, what will be the change coming up next? What will be the challenges to multinationals? How do we cope with that? We have 5 panelists attending this panel, and they will share with us their personal experience and their thought-provoking ideas. First, I would like to ask Thompson Lee from TCL to say a few words about the trends of value chain restructuring around the world on globalization, on the rulebook around globalization, as well as the role of Chinese companies in this restructuring exercise. Thank you, Professor Chen. The restructuring of the global value chain has been mentioned time and again in the last few years, and I would like to address this topic from a top-down approach. We joined the WTO about 20 years ago. The setup of the WTO was for the purpose of realizing trade and investment liberalization around the world and driving industry, supply chain, and value chain reconfiguration through market forces. That was the context. And the restructuring of the value industry chain has been happening in the most optimal, efficient way. That was the tenet of the WTO upon its founding. 20 years later, we realized that economic globalization, the rulebook of the WTO, has indeed delivered a huge boon to the world. But the distribution of the gains has not been even. Some gained more, others lost in this game. It has to do with the comparative advantage of the country, the competitiveness. China definitely is among the most competitive, and the reality is that China has benefited a lot in globalization. And the trade route between China and the US this time around, as well as the concern about reconfiguring the global supply chain, can be understood in three lights. First, the impact of COVID-19. This could be a fallacy. Why we propose this? Because the Americans found it was difficult to buy ventilators or masks, and a lot of them were manufactured in China. They thought it was unreasonable and it was insecure as a supply chain arrangement. But come to think of that, it's not making a lot of sense. We made a lot of masks because we were the most efficient. So there's no case for China to use this as leverage. And at the time, the total supply of masks was not enough. So even if it were in the US, it would be difficult for others to access. And China actually was the most efficient at churning out the masks. So if you were to measure in the light of COVID-19, whether having supply chain concentrated in China is actually making more sense rather than less sense. Second, as I mentioned, due to competitiveness difference and also uneven stages of development, countries have benefited differently from the WTO process. Benefits were reaped through tariff and non-tariff measures, protectionist measures. This was a balancer, and the WTO wanted to reduce those measures, but for a country or a region, they wanted to use those measures to make sure the distribution is more even and rational. So I believe there's some sense, some validity to this argument, why it's being driven by economic forces, and we have to adapt to this proactively. For the first 8 months of this year, my company's overseas sales grew 10%. Exports grew 6.6%. Why we were able to grow overseas relatively unscathed? Because our manufacturing was already located in some foreign countries. We make products, we sell the products locally, and then we drive local supply chain ecosystem, and then we export from that country. That arrangement is contributing jobs and giving economic returns to the host country. So our business model has been well received locally, and it's perceived as sustainable. How Chinese companies can adapt to the new international reality, I believe this will be a persistent question, how we reconfigure the value chain. And I think that's a very important consideration going forward. So you were saying that you've been dealing with the crisis well because you made investments early on. Next up, Xiaomi. Xiaomi is a Fortune 500 company. In 2019, mobile handset shipment number was number 4. And it started making mobile phones in India locally. I have a question for Mr. Lei. Given that we have globalization and deglobalization happening at the same time, how do we improve our competitiveness along the value chain so that we can stay and protect our market share? We were set up 10 years ago. For Xiaomi, this is an important point in time. for 6 months, we've been recapping, we have been self-reflecting and synthesizing our experience and lessons. There's been a lot of takeaways. 10 years ago, we founded Xiaomi because we wanted to make mobile phones using internet thinking. We wanted to become the best brand for mobile phones. We wanted to sell at 50% of the market price, and then we could give benefits to the consumers. So that was as simple as that. So it's internet plus manufacturing. That was the original intention. 10 years later, after the uh, learning, start taking exercise, we realized that there's been more that we can do. We have to catch up. We have to learn from the big and most advanced manufacturing businesses. We have to up our game. And there are three ways we can do that. One, innovation. Second, quality management. Third, learning from others. And interaction, end-to-end delivery capability. So after this many years, we now have 50% of our revenue coming from international sales, and we're now in 90 countries. We tested the first overseas market, India, and now we're number one in terms of market share, over 30%, and for 12 consecutive quarters, we've been number one. So the Xiaomi model is able to adapt to international environments. So then we shifted, we expanded to Europe, and now we're over 10% in market share and in the top three in Europe. In Spain, in the last 2 quarters, we were in number one. In France, we were number two. And in other major markets, we've made some breakthroughs and hit milestones. Talking about globalization, and in particular in this economic climate, reconfiguring the value chain will be a complicated exercise. I have some observations to make. When we look into our weaknesses, we decided to develop domain expertise in manufacturing. But how do we build that expertise? We have to work on smart manufacturing. In the last 3 years, we've been making efforts, and earlier this year, the smart manufacturing plant of Xiaomi is now commissioned, and it's plant for making premium mobile phones. All the production lines are automated, so the lights never go out. This is still difficult for premium products manufacturing. There's only 100 people working at the plant. The majority of them are engineers, and we're making 1 million at the plant. It's not a big number.
But it's fully automated. It fully shows the possibility of full automation. To my pride, on this production line, for the machines, most of them have been self-developed by Xiaomi or are developed by companies where Xiaomi have made investments. So highly, very much domesticated or with a very high domestic content. So in the next step, we hope we are able to have a production line for 10 million high-end mobile phones, fully automated without human labor. For such a factory, the output value every year will be 50 to 60 billion yuan, but only employing 50 or 60 people. So that is the future of a high technology. Now, the cost is less than 80% of that of OEM partners. So I think in the future, smart manufacturing will be the most critical part of the reshaping of the manufacturing industry. In that way, wherever you decide to build a factory, it doesn't quite matter actually. It would be much easier. Second, We will also further enhance domestic content of our supply chain. In fact, in 2013, for our Hongmi production line, we already gave a priority to China's domestically procured and produced components. Now, even more so. In recent years, Xiaomi also has invested into a lot of parts and components suppliers who have a strong R&D capability. We believe Xiaomi also has the responsibility to improve domestic content of our products and our value chain. I highly agree with Mr. Lee, Thompson Lee, that when your business is big, when the economy is already very big, companies should always follow the local policies, laws, and regulations. We should be a good corporate citizen wherever you go. For example, when we first entered into India and Indonesia, we already knew that the local communities had a high expectation upon us. Xiaomi has a big assembly lines there. For example, in India, together with the partner, we have employed 50,000 people, so creating a lot of jobs. For the restructuring of Xiaomi's supply chain, I think I have a three-pronged strategy. First, digital manufacturing. Second, domestic substitution or increasing domestic content. Third, globalization of your value chain and the supply chain. So globally, you also become more competitive. Okay, for the next company, Nine Dragons Paper Holdings Limited, it ranks, I think, 309 in China's top 500. It's also one of the Forbes global top 2000. Nine Dragons Paper also has made a lot of MAs in Southeast Asia and other countries and regions. It intends to be the world-class packaging paper producer. I give the floor to its chairman, Madam Zhang Ying. That given the challenges of a pandemic, the challenges of a protectionism, and given the so many uncertainties, what do you intend to do? Madam Zhang, thank you. How to deal with, how to respond to the pandemic, to unilateralism, to deglobalization, to uncertainties? Well, our President Xi Jinping has proposed the economic strategy of putting domestic markets as the focus and relying on dual circulation. We must follow it. In fact, for different industries, we also must follow the president's new strategy. I believe there are huge potentials. For the other panelists, you are from the manufacturing industry. Then the U.S. unilateralism definitely has created a lot of risks and uncertainties against manufacturers. I also have factories in the U.S. The U.S. manufacturing cost is very high and not competitive. But when the government is unreasonable, will the manufacturing capacities move from China to neighboring countries? Maybe now, not yet, but it will happen in the future. We must foresee that possibility. Then, what is my opinion? First, I think we must maintain made in China manufacturing competitiveness. In the past 40 years, China's manufacturing has been famous for high quality yet low cost. So the made in China has a very good supply chain. It's not expensive, it's convenient, and e-commerce has facilitated its trade and the transactions. So the digital technology has combined China's advantages in manufacturing and China's capabilities in digitalization, not to be copied by any other countries yet. In the next step, I think we must further maintain and improve the competitiveness of China's manufacturing technology sectors. definitely we should be the front runner. Second, we should also benchmark with advanced countries so that we are able to substitute a lot of imports. That is a part of a dual circulation. Because for the Chinese industries, our dream is to benchmark or even outperform the counterparts in advanced countries, so no one can hold us hostage. For example, for paper making, my industry, in the past 2 years, we have made a lot of efforts. We have changed our composition of raw materials. We have increased R&D. Definitely, we are able to substitute the imported high-quality, high-end packaging paper, including packaging paper for food, which should be highly hygienic and which is green. For my company, we rank number 2 globally in terms of the production capacity of paper making. We are able to replace imported technologies to satisfy clients from different sectors. The other panelists are from manufacturing. I provide packaging paper for you, and so almost all products must have a packaging paper. So I also want to work with you in synergy. Finally, I think amid the difficulties, we should be even more incentivized to innovate. For developed countries, they don't understand China. I mean, not all. At least many advanced countries don't understand China. China might not be very good in terms of innovation, but if the Chinese are incentivized to do so, are spurred up to do so, we are capable of it. So in that way, the current crisis is also an opportunity. Since there are so many difficulties and pressure upon Chinese companies, they will only be pressurized and incentivized to innovate, to develop, to grow, to survive, and to prosper. So for my company, as I have said, we have a lot of changes for raw materials. Previously, we imported a lot of raw materials. Therefore, we were not very passionate about our domestic R&D. But after the ban of such imports, and after our own efforts, now my company can provide raw materials and can produce high quality packaging paper, which even have a higher quality than some imported products, because we have been pressurized to do so. We have the smart leadership of the government of the Communist Party. We have the very capable Chinese entrepreneurs. We have a huge potentials of made in China. Definitely, I'm very optimistic about the future of made in China. Thank you. How about Panasonic? Panasonic had a history of more than 100 years and also is a globalized company. It has more than 500 subsidiaries in different parts of the world. Last year, Panasonic established the Northeast Asian and the China headquarters in Beijing, the first time for Panasonic to establish such an entity outside Japan. Then Mr. Tetsuro Homa is president and CEO of the Panasonic China and Northeastern Asian Company. I give the floor to Mr. Homa. So with the COVID-19 pandemic, is the Panasonic supply chain disrupted or affected? Will you make changes or upgrading to your supply chain? And also for Mr. Homa, for China's role in the future global supply chain, what is China's role and contribution? I give the floor to Mr. Homa. Thank you, Professor Qian. Thank you for your kind introduction. Yes, I'm Homa from Panasonic. Panasonic really is a global company. Definitely, trade wars, of course, will have disruptions against us. I can talk about the Panasonic history in terms of reshaping the supply chain. In fact, in the 1970s for our color TV sets, in the 1980s for our video recorders, in the 1990s for the mobile phone business. In fact, almost every time Panasonic had to reshape the global supply chain. We use a lot of money and manpower to do the reshaping work. We have a principle that we produce where we sell. That if we want to sell to a country, we must have a factory in that country so we can have a local production and a local supplies and local sales. That is a Panasonic principle. For example, for the US Tesla, Tesla is my client. We provide lithium Tesla. We have American factories supplying 100%. At the beginning, in our Osaka, we produced lithium batteries to American clients, but later the U.S. procurement became ever bigger, so we decided to establish a factory, gigafactory in the United States. Now the American factory already has a quite stable production. For Panasonic current supply chain, I think, yes, the pandemic has not greatly changed our supply side, our supply chain yet. In China, for our Chinese business, we also try to reduce the imported components and we procure more materials and components from inside China. So there is a small change to our policy. For Panasonic, our business in China is very important. The China market also accounts for about 1/4 of our business. Our procurement from China is 1/3 of our total global procurement. So definitely we will further help improve the current China supply chain. We will make the best of the capabilities of Chinese software companies and the capabilities of the other Chinese partners. By working together, I think we can visualize our supply chain. In that way, we can further reduce cost and increase efficiency. For Panasonic, well, China maybe is not only a manufacturing country or a digital country. China is an innovative power and also engineering power. For the Chinese society and for the Chinese market, as Professor Qian, you have said last year, yes, we established the headquarters of China and the northeastern business of Panasonic in Beijing. That was a landmark decision for Panasonic. I want to have more exchanges and cooperation with my partner companies and with the rest of you to help upgrade our supply chain.
Medea is number 132 on the Fortune 500 list. It has 42% revenue coming from overseas sales. It has 200 subsidiaries, 600 representative offices offshore, and 10 business groups offshore. And its first business presence was in Vietnam, a manufacturing plant. It has also made acquisitions in Germany, Israel, Japan, and many other countries. Next, I would like to give the floor to Paul Fang. He will talk about his company's performance in COVID-19 this year and as a multinational business, how Medea is responding to the different uncertainties and complexities of the environment, including the trade tension and COVID-19. Manufacturing is a global activity. In the last 20-30 years of globalization, it has truly become a vertically integrated, globally present activity. Indeed, we're facing some challenges, trade barriers, and non-trade barriers, and tensions. This has caught us by surprise to some extent, and after COVID-19, we believe there's a need to change. First, we will have to focus more on security and efficiency, and we have to make some trade-off. We now have 17 manufacturing bases in 13 countries, about 18 R&D centers, and 40,000 people employed. Previously, our business was more cost-driven, so logistic costs, the economics, the cost benefits, we focus more on those components. Now we have to give priority also to security of the supply chain. That's why in April, after the onset of COVID-19, we activated a program. In the eastern corridor of Thailand, we built a new manufacturing plant, and around the Suez Canal in Egypt, we also built a second plant. So those decisions were made during COVID-19, and this is to keep us safe from the interference of geopolitical tensions. Second, we have to balance between global and regional. Previously, we had a global footprint, but our footprint was revolving around made in China and supplied to the world. But now we have to shift a bit more toward regional-based regionalism. We have to shift some of our manufacturing of key components and parts to other regional hubs, and we have to balance between local production and production in China. Third, we were more preoccupied with agility and flexibility. Now we have to think about resilience, because we are inevitably going to see crisis. So we will have to be able to enter and exit quickly. In many countries, for example, our plant is still closed in India today, and this is really causing a lot of challenges to our local regional operations. How we improve that kind of flexibility is another consideration. I also want to mention that given that we are reconstructing global value chain, so to reconstruct, it means you have to destruct first. But if you were to destruct completely, that destruction will inevitably add to costs. And the cost will be borne by consumers around the world. And the disintegration of the value chain in varying degrees will result in compromised abilities to innovate or the willingness to innovate. And this will also dampen the efficiency along the value chain. So on a worldwide basis, if we were to deliver more value, low-cost, affordable consumer goods to our people, we will have to resort to international cooperation, or at least we have to work on the regional level to become truly competitive. We heard from the 5 business leaders, and they shared their experience in today's world of supply chain shift and how they have coped with this trend. We know the shift and restructuring of the global value chain will not be a short-lived phenomenon. It will be a long-term trend, a change. So the next question to you is, when it comes to formulating strategies related to supply chain, what will be your thinking for the long term and your recommendations? And I would like to start with Paul, because you touched upon this already. Could you maybe extend to this strategy issue, how we think about strategy for the long term? Speaking of my company's own prosperity, I think we have to work on automation and digitalization. We've been talking about this for years, but we have not been aggressive in action. Digitalizing the supply chain uh, is about digitalizing it in China, but also beyond. And it involves issues such as standard, interoperability, compatibility, and there are some challenges ahead. And in our total scheme of things, we have to think about that. Mr. Homa, you mentioned in your presentation that Panasonic is already a century-old business, and you've made a lot of changes, including your colored TV set business. So, in terms of planning for the long term for business, in the face of the global value chain shifts, what will be the considerations that you propose? What should be the inputs for this strategy? I mentioned the color TV set plant in the 70s and the plant that we built in the 80s. They are now extinct because the products are no longer needed and some products no longer have relevancy. That's why we do not maintain those factories in Europe or the US. And we believe the global value chain will have to be located closer to market, and our competitiveness will have to improve. It can be done through digital tools or smart manufacturing technology. So improving our competitiveness is the ultimate answer. The restructuring of the global value chain is not only upon businesses, government policy also plays a part. What will be the role and the value from government policy? So I would like to ask the business leaders, if you were to make a policy recommendation to the government, what type of policies would be the most beneficial for companies to overcome the challenges and grow better? From a business standpoint, what type of policies will be the most helpful? I would like to give the floor to Chen Yang from Nine Dragons. What will be the single policy recommendation that you made to the government to help your business? To paper making. It's about changing, transforming our raw materials. If you were to ask me to make a recommendation to the state, I think the 14th five-year plan is showing a lot of promises. So you you close the door, but you open a window for us. So there's already some positive message in the 14th FYP. So the country is already doing quite well. Then how do we make sure the peace system and many of the other systems can be adopted better in our processes? This is something we will focus on going forward. Mr. Li Dongsheng from TCL, what will be your recommendation to the government to help companies to survive in these global shifts of supply chain? To China, to the government, deepening the reform is key. Previously, the Chinese system was focused on opening up and FDI attraction. For sure, opening up will continue as a policy, but the transformation in China would also mean encouraging Chinese companies to go global. We heard from Governor Liu and Party Secretary Liu and the governor the FTP policy. This is about deepening the reform. It's also about opening more efficiently to the outside world to support China's integration into the global economic system. I recommend the government pursue more in-depth policy discussions. The policy will have to support Chinese companies to transform in the context of new globalization and support Chinese companies to rebuild their competitiveness in the global shift of value chain. We have 3 minutes left for this session. For this segment, I would like to ask the business leaders to wrap up in a word to cope with this reconfiguration of supply chain. What will be the critical components and success factors? Let's go in this order. Each summarize this in a word. What will be the critical success factors? China is now the factory of the world. Chinese companies are now building factories around the world. That will be the next step. I think the most important is technological innovation. Only with technological leadership and the ability to innovate can we make sure we upgrade in the reconfiguration process. Mr. Lei, smart manufacturing will be the best way to go for manufacturing in China. Chen Yang, I think manufacturing in China is already globalized. How do we maintain affordability and good value for money is truly critical. Mr. Homa, to our company, we have to change all the time, so the ability to adapt to change is critical. Thank you to the business leaders sitting on the panel. Each one of them leads a sizable business, a business that's very significant in the global value chain. And in COVID-19, each has responded well, and also they have shared their insights for the future. Very important, thought-provoking ideas. In the interest of time, we would like to wrap up this segment. I think we have to make positive contribution to the reconfiguration of the global value chain going forward. Let's thank the 5 panelists again. Thank you to the business leaders and Professor Qian for demonstrating to me how to be a good moderator. While you come from an economics background, I'm an economic practitioner. I should be able to moderate well. So I have to train after this meeting. The next to speak is representing a state-owned enterprise, so I won't comment too much. I know that he's run 3 SOEs, all 3 on the Fortune 500 list. And thanks to his involvement, the company grew to become an outperformer in its respective industry. So he needs no introduction, Mr. Frank Ning, the chairman of Sinochem.
The honorable officials, honorable guests, dear friends from the business community, it's my great pleasure to be a keynote speaker. What's the order? Am I the last to speak? And Lao Xu said that you are before Jack Ma. That made me uncomfortable. Why? Because if Jack Ma is going to speak, I don't need to speak at all. For our CEC, we always have an opinion. That's when Jack Ma speaks, you only need to listen. But I'm going to speak before Jack Ma. It's very difficult for me. And also the moderator introduced me as someone from the SOE. SOEs, in fact, are always humiliated by your guys, and we are the vulnerable people in the society. So I know why you have asked me to speak before Jack Ma. Only someone from SOE can be emboldened to speak before Jack Ma. But our SOEs always are, in fact, in the process of a reform. We have a 3-year reform agenda for China's SOEs because we also want to make SOEs more competitive. But of course, private companies must also be subject to reforms and transformations. Not long ago, I met some American friends. They asked me how the progress was with SOE reform. I asked, how is America reform going on? I should reform, and the United States should also reform. The organizer has asked me to talk about globalization. Again, very difficult. Still, are you going to talk about globalization? Isn't it deglobalization? But they have asked me to talk about challenges and the future of a globalization. Definitely many challenges, but is there a future for globalization? Maybe no. Who knows? Well, of course, now most of us are Chinese people. Chinese people still love talking about globalization or integration, but outside China or on other occasions, people don't quite talk about globalization. Now, for most of us, whether or not you like it, have become nationalists or populists or even racists. Why? Because the environment has made it so. Last year, Jack Ma, you shot a movie, Green Book. Yes, so on that day, you were visiting Sinochem, and you said that you were given the Oscar Award. Today, Jack, next you should shoot another movie, BLL, Black Lives Matter. You should shoot that BLL movie. It's very powerful because the BLL movement, well, for Jack, the movie you shot last time was about a story 60 years ago. But 60 years later, now, there is again the Black Lives Matter movement in the United States, BLL. Well, actually, for human society, we have made a lot of progress about nature, about how to make use of nature, but we make little progress in coping with the so many social problems. Maybe we have a racism because of some genetic deficiency. I used to live for a couple of years in the U.S., so I know it very well. There are different manifestations of racism or racial discrimination in the United States. The U.S. has never, in fact, killed racial discrimination. Then for globalization, also don't be too worried about it. The previous panel had members from mainly manufacturing companies. They had a very good discussion about how to reshape the global supply chain. Even without U.S.-China trade war, even without the COVID-19, the global supply chain has already been reshaped very efficiently. It's going to be upgraded again. Upgrading comes faster. Why? Why am I still somewhat optimistic? In fact, for Chinese companies' go global endeavor, I also have made investments abroad. I would like to maintain overseas investments. China, for a long time, I don't think will invest overseas heavily. Not likely. For China's capital, technologies, management, well, can, at least for the time being, can we encourage all the Chinese companies to compete globally? Maybe too early yet. Why? Because of the markets, because of the raw materials, because of the technologies, we must have overseas investments, definitely. But if the government encourages its businesses all to go global, what does it mean? Does it mean that the government doesn't welcome the companies or For example, in other words, if the government asks the people to travel abroad, not to stay at home, isn't it very strange? Even Switzerland, the very advanced economy, is very keen on attracting FDIs. So even though you don't go global, it's okay. You just stay in China and make investments and make money here. Well, I need to dispel some misnotions. Some people say that China has too much money and therefore China has to invest the money abroad. It's very misleading. Such an opinion is very misleading. Maybe some Chinese people are wealthy, but most Chinese people are not rich. But sometimes the data can be misleading. Some people say that China's GDP is the second largest in the world. But the concept of a GDP is misleading. In 1995, with the support from the United States, the UN adopted GDP as a golden standard. That's to say, to replace GNP with GDP. In fact, when I studied at the university, we mainly talked about GNP, gross national product. But now it's GDP. The full name of a GDP is about not caring where the companies are located. In fact, if you calculate China's GNP, it's smaller than GDP, and on a per capita basis, the numbers are meager. So there is a gap. However, there is also the responsibility upon us. We don't care about whether or not China is the second largest economy. I have just got started, yet the moderator says I just have 2 more minutes. I will be efficient. I will share with you with some important concepts. Yes, a lot of misconceptions. For example, trade surplus is always better than trade deficit. Not necessarily. RMB depreciation is always better than appreciation. A lot of our personal savings, a lot of foreign exchange reserves, are they good? In the US-China war, has China gained more advantages? In the past decades, China has exported so much to the United States, yet the Chinese only have got some jobs at the sweatshops. The biggest beneficiary is the US. Can we change with the US that China becomes America and China has a lot of a trade deficit with the US? China, however, invests a lot overseas. Will that be good? Or for can we change the roles with the United States? For the Chinese, we want, definitely. We want it. So for the Chinese, we need to operate our country, operate the country the way like you operate your business. You mean I have 5 more minutes? Very strange. So the timekeeper is wrong. So, no. I don't want to ask for more time. More time is justifiable for Jack Ma. Jack Ma can speak for whatever long he wishes, but I could not do it. Jack Ma would say, the world is already so chaotic. Do we still need globalization? Well, don't worry. Still, don't worry too much. For globalization, it's not created by Donald Trump. It has never been championed by Donald Trump or any other government. Globalization is the natural outcome of the evolution of a supply chain. People will not be so stupid as to deglobalize. Why? Supply chain must have efficiency, must make use of resources, must make livelihoods for people better. So globalization is not going to be killed by any single individual. In the short term, you might have some problems. There is some political manipulation, but people are so smart. Definitely, we don't want to jeopardize globalization. We don't want to live in isolation. We are too smart to do such stupid things. I once had a telephone call with a chairman of a COFCO. He said that Coca-Cola was building a second factory in Guizhou. So even now, Coca-Cola is building one more factory in China. So why do you still talk about deglobalization? For Donald Trump, someone has purchased some golf equipment from the golf course owned by Donald Trump. For the golf equipment, most of them are made in China, including the badge, the suits, the caps, etc. For Nike, Starbucks, and many other of such consumer goods companies, more than half of their revenues are from outside the United States. If there is a deglobalization, China can still survive, but most other countries will perish because of deglobalization. So the Chinese are not afraid of so-called the threat of globalization. So I have got 1 or 2 more minutes. Oh, sorry, I have one more paper to finish. For mankind, usually when we first come into contact with a crisis, for example, the COVID-19, we didn't think it would be so serious. But later, when it became bigger, we really became frightened, and then we overreacted. For crisis can only kill those things which deserve fatality. Yet a crisis, as the other speakers have said, will accelerate digitalization, AI, and other such technologies. In the past half a year, we cut the number of meetings. We also cut the number of flights, but we still have survived. So it means a lot of meetings are unnecessary. But don't be over-optimistic. For my company, Sinochem, well, in fact, in recent days, I am also on the negative list, or communist Chinese military company list. My company is also on that American blacklist. Am I frightened? Well, I'm not frightened. I ask why. Why do you put me on the blacklist? Any criteria? The U.S. said it's no criteria. Simply, we put you on that blacklist. Why do you put me on that blacklist? You should have some qualifications for me. So it's not reliable. It's very amusing. So, ladies and gentlemen, for dual circulation, it's good. The biggest benefit is for people's livelihood. So in the future, China's efforts will always be aimed at improving the people's livelihood. For globalization, I want globalization not of the companies. Rather, globalization should mean China has increasing global influence and reputation. That's all people in other countries want to speak Chinese, and RMB is accepted globally. We don't need to use US dollars. Chinese passports have visa waivers everywhere, and the Chinese students even don't need to travel abroad for advanced studies. They just stay at home to learn the best. That really shows we are so capable. But there's a long way to go.
Thank you for apologizing for taking up the time. Thank you, Frank. You said that SOEs were being bullied. So, last but not the least, we would like to ask the heavyweight speaker, Jack Ma. He needs no introduction. Distinguished leaders, guests, and members of the CEC Club, good afternoon, good evening. It's my great pleasure to meet you all. We know after COVID-19, meeting each other in person is truly rare and truly valued. This is the first time that we are convening this summit in Hainan, and there's so many of us gathering in Hainan. We come to Hainan with no other intention but to support the FTP because we believe China needs opening up, it needs integration with the world. 2020 is truly extraordinary. It will be the watershed year. Hainan's status as a free trade port will also be a historic choice. We hope our meeting, the summit in Hainan, will also be across two different times. After COVID-19, after new globalization starts, and before the entire digitalization era dawns upon us, we believe the entrepreneurs in the club will be able to create unique value in this process. I was in Wuhan and I was with the CEC members in Wuhan a few months ago. I was watching Wuhan on TV. It was truly remarkable, difficult for them. And now I came to Wuhan, I felt that it was really heroic. And we do have concluded the COVID-19 crisis in China, but we have to think about rebirth, recovery, and going beyond. We have to see the future, see the trends, see the opportunities in COVID-19. And then we came from Wuhan to Hainan. I think this is coincidental but also inevitable. 2 years ago, President Xi announced the strategy to build the FTP in Hainan and the strategy to open up fully. 2 years later, the world has undergone tremendous changes, but we remain committed to opening up to globalization after COVID-19. I believe all the doors in the world will require knocking on them. You have to open the doors with your own hands. No door is ajar for you to enter. So I think globalization holds more significance than ever before. We're now at the new starting point. The FTP is not just an opportunity confined to Hainan or confined to the Chinese economy. Rather, it will have to undertake the responsibility to explore a new path for globalization, for prosperity, for the whole world. I think globalization is now perceived as a multilateral business, a very important concept that concerns everyone, every country in the world. Many believe that globalization is hitting a wall. Some also argue that globalization is at the end of its life. I don't agree. Why? Because I believe today we are on the cusp of the next round of true globalization. We are ending the globalization that was conventional, that belonged to the industrial era. Globalization that's genuine, that's for the digital era, is only starting today. Globalization was dominated by developed countries and large companies. Going global, going forward, it will be led by developing countries and SMEs. Trade was the main driver of globalization. Going forward, technology will be the main driver. People were moving, goods were moving. Going forward, data will be flowing and services will be flowing. Before, it was globalization for traditional players and businesses. Going forward, it will be globalization for tech-enabled companies, tech-savvy companies. Anyone with the access to a mobile phone will be able to do business globally. And all the SMEs in the future will be multinationals. Before, there was globalization for 6,000 big companies. Going forward, it will be globalization for the 60 million small businesses. And the expansion of their footprint will present great opportunities. Second, we believe globalization this time around is driven by China's domestic demand. in this round of globalization and speaking at the free trade port in Hainan, I truly feel that this time around the FTP is about writing the game rules and inviting players from around the world rather than participating in a game that was designed by others. So China will shift from selling globally to buying globally 5, 6 years ago. I had some concerns about globalization, about China, about the world. I think China will be facing the most difficult 20 years. In the last few years, there's one country that's been asking us whether you listen to us, whether you want to go to war, whether you want to sell to us. If we stick to this thinking, I think it will be the demise of globalization for sure. The FTP in Hainan has its own mission to accomplish, and its legacy to the world would be for China if we are happy we're not happy with the rule of the game, then we should be able to have the gut, have the vision, and also the skills to change the rule of the game to benefit more countries, more people. It has to be a fairer, more sustainable, and a greener set of rules. So we should not be afraid. Going from selling to buying globally, every time the door opens in China, new things happen, progress ensued. We have to go global. And I remember when we were saying global, we were trying to benchmark, we're trying to learn from the best. Now Chinese companies going global, Chinese businesses going global. We are trying to find our place. And sometimes we don't think they are doing enough. For example, their roads are not as modern, their infrastructure is not as well developed. The last round of globalization was driven by the consumers, 300 million in the US mainly. But I believe the next round of globalization will be driven by the 1.4 billion and more people in China. We have to be grateful to globalization that we have seen to date, but we have to show responsibility. Import is not the destination. It will have to force upgrades and transformation, and services transformation in particular. The opportunities of the future will lie in the lower tier cities, the cities with a million population each. I've done some statistics. China has 167 cities that have a population over 1 million. The infrastructure as well as the industrial demand driven by the population is really unmet or undermet. And I think we probably will hit 300 such cities, and there will be infinite potential for consumer spending. So domestic consumption is not driven by the wealthy, but it's about meeting the needs and demands of every individual in China. I think the unmet demand is actually lying with the underprivileged people, ordinary people, the 1 billion plus Chinese. Third, new globalization is about serving the world with new abilities and skills. At the heart of globalization, we're creating value, creating jobs. We are accomplishing the impossible, making it possible. We have to export our talent, our information, services, our value proposition. Globalization is the ability to serve the world. It's not the ability to make money around the world. Chinese companies should remain committed to going global, but it's not about prevailing and winning around the world. Like mountain climbing, it's not about conquering nature, it's about getting your own value. So it's a quest. It's not profit driven. We should win back respect in the process. We have to show that we are a country that's in good faith, that's really having good aspirations rather than the strength and the muscle. We have to create new value, different values rather than exporting excess capacities. We have to respect the local customs, religions, the values, as well as the different processes. The world is better because of the differences. So you can't expect everyone to be the same or to be like you. 2020 is a year of transition. I've talked to many business leaders and I see apprehension is really quite a shared feeling. I think it's common sense. Some are more sensitive, others less. My projection is that in the longer term, we will have prosperity. In the medium and short term, we will have difficulties. It's like the aircraft going through turbulence in the clouds. We have to fasten our seatbelt. We have to keep our hands on the wheel. But I think going forward, we need to see opportunities as well. When you compare tomorrow with yesterday, don't just find the pessimistic story. We need to be future oriented. We need to use future's approach to solve future's problems. Many are very optimistic, many are very pessimistic. I think going to two extremes won't help, and it's because they haven't seen through. So your decision and action today determines your path forward. Future is not about 2 years later, what will happen in 2 years, but rather in 20, 30 years, what will be happening to your business. The companies represented here, the achievements that you have made, were not made yesterday. They were made because of the efforts we made 20 years ago. So if you were to foretell what society will become, what the world will become like, then I think you will have confidence. We have to believe the young people will help us get there. And I think amid the great uncertainties, digitalization is the certainty. Digitalization will revolutionize every industry. Not every company has to shift or transform, but every company has to upgrade and complete that digital journey.
担心
Well, who is your competitor? The old competitor, Mr. Wang, who has competed with you for the past 20 years? No. You should be more worried about Yang Li, someone who you have never seen, but they are young. They have no historical leftovers, but they are very good in using modern technologies and the internet. These young people are your competitors. They represent the hope of China. For our entrepreneurs, your biggest competitors are the young people. In fact, the competitors are not internet companies, but the young generation of entrepreneurs and their businesses who are good in making use of the internet. I hope all businesses today must carefully consider how you can use digital technologies to upgrade yourselves, upgrade your products, your organization structure, your management, your portfolio. The next 10 years are the last opportunity. 20 years ago, I, on different occasions, already forecast the shocks and the disruptions of e-commerce to traditional retailing. For Tmall, for Taobao, for Alibaba, for Tencent, for Baidu. When these companies really emerged, then traditional companies cried, the wolf has come. But actually, these wolves already were waiting there. So if you don't change, in 10 years' time, you will be the recipients of digital poverty alleviation benefits. However, some people still say that digital technology transformation not so important. Digital technology is only an instrument or a toolkit. No, not so simple. Digital technology will redefine manufacturing, redefine retailing technologies, raw materials, and everything. Or even very soon, digital technology will totally reshape the productive relationship, also will even reshape the government. This morning at the ambassador's closed-door meeting, I reminded the people of the importance of SMEs, especially in the post-pandemic era. If SMEs could not survive, I'm afraid the world is not going to embrace a technological revolution, but a social unrest or even social revolution. Now, the farther away you are from technology, the less you are digitally transformed yet, you have the bigger room to make a difference. If the businesses can make some investments in technology, in talented people, in philosophy, in mentality, you get a lot of returns. If you are purely an IT company, maybe the returns are not certain. But if a traditional business uses digital technology for transition, the returns definitely are huge. And I call upon the boss of the traditional businesses to change. You are the key. If you, as the boss, don't want to change your business, you don't have a vision, and so the business has no future. The pandemic was sooner or later be put under control. But coronavirus might not die, and it will be part of our human society for the next centuries or even millennia. Coronavirus can, I'm afraid, outlive everybody. We should learn to adapt. We might not have a war against the coronavirus yet, but in the future, maybe hospitals will always have a coronavirus department. So we need to learn to adapt. 2020 is a year of a watershed. In Wuhan, CEC members also have been very incentivized. We believe that entrepreneurs are not simply billionaires. Not all billionaires are entrepreneurs. Who are entrepreneurs? Entrepreneurs are high-quality national assets. When the country has a crisis, entrepreneurs will never step back. We proactively try to help. When the crisis breaks out, we will not step backwards. After the pandemic is put under control, the entrepreneurs must work our best to help recover the economy. Ladies and gentlemen, if your business has not gone through 3 or even 5 crises, you are too vulnerable. In fact, for all businesses doing well, they have been through a lot of changes and even crises. When you are at a critical juncture in history, you should have the sense of responsibility, not to win people's applauses, not to get policy support, rather because you want to do so from the bottom of your heart. Entrepreneurs should have a sense of responsibility. We should have the forward-looking vision. We should have the strategic thinking. We should be the communicator with the rest of the world. By working hard, we make the world better. Thank you. Many thanks to Jack Ma, chairman of the CEC, for the wonderful closing speech. He really is a philosopher, is a visionary, yet his ideas also are down to earth. So for entrepreneurs, well, really he is philosophical and down to earth. So are you from the Venus? No, you can only come from planet Earth. But for Jack, sometimes his thinking is so different from us. But when you carefully listen, when you digest and interpret, you will find it's so beneficial. You can benefit so much from Jack Ma. Again, many thanks to Jack. Ladies and gentlemen, business growth in the digital era. This is a question that must be answered by everybody. All entrepreneurs must learn to answer the question. In the digital era, if you still go business as usual, you don't have a brilliant future. As Jack has said, we are already in the era of a digital transformation, so all entrepreneurs must live with the reality, must embrace digital technologies and mindsets to reform our traditional models and the traditional portfolio. Only in that way we can survive and prosper in the next economic cycle, or in the new round of globalization. We can still do well, and we can contribute to world economic recovery. I hope our discussion today is only the beginning. Definitely in the future, more discussion, more exploration is necessary. Again, many thanks to Panasonic and other supporting organizations. Thanks to the media for covering our events. Thanks to the young volunteers for your hard work. See you next year, ladies and gentlemen. See you next year.